Hi, I'm Dr. Brittany Bussey. I'm Associate Medical Director here at WorkCare, and today we're going to talk about stress management and burnout prevention. And we all know that there are many sources of stress. We are still in a global pandemic, and the stress levels are at an all-time high. It's from dealing with the day-to-day events and the people that we have to talk to every day. They're under stress, which is putting us under even more stress. And then we have to go home and deal with those events at home as well. So a recent Gallup poll has shown that US workers have much higher levels of stress than any other workers around the world. And this was just recently released here in 2021. 57% of US and Canadian workers actually report feeling stressed on a daily basis, and that was up 8 percentage points from the previous year. The rates of daily stress, worry, sadness, and anger have been going up over the last 9 years, or actually longer, since 2009. We have lots of concerns right now, like we talked about, concerns about getting sick, about whether or not to be vaccinated, about whether or not your family members are going to be vaccinated, as well as financial insecurity and racial tension is really causing a lot of increased stress for people right now. These stress spikes are especially acute in women because we are the ultimate caretakers, especially around the home, and there's a lot more stress that's put on us when it comes to worrying about those day-to-day activities of our children and our other family members, or even elder care. So we know that stress starts to occur for people when there is an unmet need. So you can see here on our diagram that I've shown what's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's a pyramid, and it shows that at each level we have different needs that need to be met before we can progress on to the next level. So whenever there's an unmet need at a specific level, that's going to be a source of stress. So we might have physiological needs that are not being met. Again, that could be, do you have a warm place to sleep? Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have enough finances to cover those things? We have safety needs. We have to feel secure. If there's a lot of racial tension, we might not feel safe, or you might not feel safe as a woman walking around outside. And then we can move up to belongingness and relationship needs. So in a time of isolation and working remotely, are you really connecting with people on a daily basis? Those are met, and we move up to esteem needs. And remote working can really affect this because you may have a lot of meetings without a lot of goals being accomplished. And if you're meeting all of those, at the end we have self-actualization. What is the point of all this? Again, goal fulfillment. Am I really being creative, or am I just doing these day-to-day activities, calling patients, doing the rote work over and over and over again? And am I feeling creative? Am I feeling fulfilled? And those can all lead to stress and burnout. Insomnia is also a big one. It's a source of stress and also a byproduct of stress. So as you get more stressed out, you might sleep less. And then that lack of sleep is actually going to become another source of stress in your life. So all of these sources of stress can really start to compound on each other. And we know that this is not occurring in a vacuum. The body and mind are intimately connected with each other. Our brain is a physical organ within our physical body, and it's connected to us via nerves as well as chemical messenger signals called neurotransmitters. And these neurological and chemical signals are originating in our brain and moving throughout our whole body. In times of stress, this typically starts in the amygdala and the hippocampus, which is where we store memories, as well as emotional responses like sadness, fear, anger. And when those are triggered by these memories, we may activate our hypothalamus, which is where the stress response originates. That then moves into your pituitary gland, which starts secreting the precursors to trigger cortisol release, which we've all heard about. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It becomes elevated in your whole body during times of stress. And this will have a variety of physiological effects on you when it starts going to your adrenal gland. And not only is cortisol released, but when our parasympathetic nervous system goes down during stress and our sympathetic nervous system comes up, we will react in our fight, flight, freeze response. And if that goes on for too long, we may reach faint, which can be an eventual collapse, something we've started to call burnout. And then the ultimate condition of that would be you could actually die from stress. So we'll see that there's a lot of physiological effects that happen in our body when this has been activated for too long. And we also know that everybody has a different starting point when it comes to stress. Adaptation is our ability to transcend a crisis and to tolerate changes in our habitual ways of doing things and develop these new norms in relation to new situations. And at the beginning, they've postulated that we are all born with a certain amount of adaptation energy, and that is our individual ability to adapt. And over time, due to trauma, stress, poor coping mechanisms, even in childhood, we start to wear down our adaptation energy. And now when new stressors come up, even if they may seem small to someone else, to us, if they're at the tipping point of our adaptation energy, it may easily spiral you into burnout. And our energy at baseline is always consistent, and like I said, but it can just decrease each time. So we need ways to rebuild ourselves from these stressors and to turn off our stress response, because each stressor will build on each other and further reduce our capacity to adapt. So we'll talk about some of the physical signs of stress. Like I said, your body will start to oversecrete cortisol as well as adrenaline, and you'll start to experience some physical symptoms during these times. If you're having headaches or dry mouth. Another way it affects us is in our GI system. So normally if we're in our parasympathetic, that's a good place for digestion. If you are in your sympathetic too much, you're going to have indigestion, you're going to have nausea, you're constipated, or even having diarrhea depending on how your body is reacting to these stress chemicals. Many people will start to feel palpitations in their chest or chest tightness, as well as high blood pressure from that overactivation and the clamping down of your blood vessels to prepare you to fight or flight. Some people may have rapid or irregular breathing or excessive sweating. High stress levels actually very common in emergency rooms. Many people will feel these symptoms and think, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. And they can be a precursor to a heart attack. But at times it's just this overwhelming amount of stress that's giving you that sensation of chest pressure and tightness and the feeling like you can't take a deep breath. We also will have emotional signs, like we talked about before. Insomnia may start creeping up. Increased addictive behavior, so noticing if you're taking more smoking breaks, or that glass of wine you have after work is suddenly turning into 2 or 3. That's really a sign that you're dealing with a lot of stress, because we're looking for ways to cope, to bring down those stress hormones. Waking up with a tight jaw could indicate that you've been grinding your teeth at nighttime when you're not aware. Some people may develop an eye tic, or they just might be frowning a lot. Lots of other tics like nail biting, pacing, or just feeling irritable and agitated can be a sign that you're under too much stress. And then you have some signs of depression creeping in, loss of pleasure or interest in your normal activities, difficulty concentrating, or on the other side you might feel what we call hypervigilance, which is very easily startled. Things around you make you feel jumpy or nervous. And other ways it might affect you is a feeling of unreality, because as our body's in this stress response for so long and we're activating that middle portion of our brain, a very primitive portion, it starts to steal blood away from our frontal lobes, which is what we use for concentrating and developing our abstract feelings about reality. So when that frontal lobe is starved of blood for a long time, you can actually start to feel like things are just not quite right. And that can just be an early sign of stress. People might start to notice things in the workplace, or you may notice them yourself. You just don't want to go to work anymore. So we have what's called absenteeism. You may notice you have to work longer hours to get things done. We call that presenteeism. You're at work, you're supposed to be physically doing things, but if your brain is taken away from what you're supposed to be doing, you're actually going to not be able to get things done in your usual amount of time. So you're present, but you're not fully engaged. So we call that presenteeism. You may be missing deadlines or have declining productivity. You may notice increasing conflicts with people you used to get along with in your workplace. You may start to feel resentment over how much you make, thinking, I just don't make enough to deal with this, and that can be an early sign of stress and burnout. Another interesting one is an inability to delegate. Like you feel like you have to have more control. You have to do it all yourself. You cannot trust another person to get it done because letting them do it would be an added source of stress. So you want to make sure you get it done yourself. Inability to accept feedback, procrastination, giving excuses for why you didn't get something done on time. And a really important one would be lack of communication. So for somebody who's normally very communicative with their team, you might notice that that person kind of starts to drift away. They're not answering their emails, maybe they're not responding to texts or group messages in the chat, and that's not usual for them. So you might think maybe that person is starting to suffer from some stress in their life and maybe I should reach out to them and find out what's going on. Or maybe you are that person and you need to reach out for help. And if you start consuming alcohol during work hours, then we should really have a talk. So we want to talk a little bit about how do we get some of our adaptation energy back. So when we're in this state of fight, flight, or freeze, that's not meant to be a long-term situation as it is for most of us as human beings. In other animals, once they've escaped a threat, they are actually able to just kind of shake it off and get rid of it and then go on with their life. You might even see that in nature. And rabbit who's running away from something, like either a coyote or maybe a bird that it saw, it will run, it'll dive into the hole, and it's frozen there. And then it slowly starts to come out, and it looks around and it sees there's no more threat. It actually gives its body a little physical shake and gets all that stress hormone out, and then hops off and goes along with its day. For humans, we have a very different mindset, also because our threats are oftentimes perceived threats. Not that they're just all in our head, but they're really, like we said, based on our memories, on our emotional responses, and those things don't just go away. We have to be able to come back and deal with them in a rational way before we can really get a good perspective on them. So we're going to talk a little bit about what can we do every day to try and decrease the stress in our lives. Number one is just having awareness of what's going on, to take a stress inventory, to ask yourself what is going on in my life right now on all of those levels. Like, where am I at? Where do I have unmet needs? And what can I do to make those needs get met? Can I do it myself? Do I need to ask for help? Or what am I really afraid of if this need doesn't get met? We as humans have really only one big fear, and that's we're gonna die. But they could be from fear of abandonment. You know, you think you're gonna die. I usually get that as a child. Like, if I don't do this the right way, my parent might ignore me, I'll be abandoned, I will die. And we carry that with us for the rest of our lives. If I don't please my boss will abandon me, I will lose my job, I won't have any money, I won't have any food, I will die. So we carry that with us. So we really need to take inventory of those fears. Are they based in reality, or are they based on these prior memories that we're carrying around with us? After we've done that, we can have compassion for ourselves. This is normal. Like I said, all humans have one fear of dying. This is a completely normal reaction for us to have. And we all started out in different places and have had different experiences, and we can have compassion for us and also for others when we think about that. And when we understand our own fears and our own judgments, it will help us decrease the fear and judgment we have over others. You can actually try to stay positive. We actually have the power to choose our response in any situation. So some people are innately optimistic, and other people can actually train themselves to become more positive in situations. And we do that by moving from what we call reaction into response. So taking the time, again, to think about your stressors, to take a deep breath, to separate yourself from the emotions that you're having. Because it's normal to have emotions that we call negative. It's normal to feel sad or afraid or lonely. What's not normal is to sit there for a long period of time. Emotions are supposed to be in motion. They're supposed to pass at some point. And so we need to focus on choosing what is an optimistic resolution in this situation. When we move out of that reaction state, that midbrain response, that reptilian brain, we go back into response, which is a more logical, more thoughtful, more compassionate way of moving forward with ourselves and with others. We can learn how to go in the flow. So flow is this really interesting state that's been studied by a lot of different psychologists. And it's something that we get when we have been engaged in a rewarding activity that is also challenging to us in some way. So there's a challenging component and an easeful component. It always makes me think of yoga, and our teacher was always saying, find the balance between really trying, between the challenge and the pull in your muscles and that easeful breath in your body. So you're trying to find an activity like that, like yoga, that challenges you but is also easy for you. So for example, you might want to have a phone conversation with someone you really care about. You're going to be challenged emotionally, things might come up, you're going to have things to say and replies to make. It's going to go back and forth, kind of like a good match, but you're going to be enjoying it, hopefully, with your friend. Going out for a walk in nature can be slightly challenging, but also easeful. For people who already play an instrument, that can be a really rewarding activity. If you're just learning, it might be more challenging than easeful in the beginning, but it could be something that you could do later on. An artistic endeavor can be really good. Spiritual training, so for people who meditate, or if you want to learn to meditate, that is something that is actually quite challenging, but deeply rewarding when you get into that state of ease. And meditation moves like that in ebbs and flows of challenge where your thoughts are coming up and easefully letting them go. So it's a good practice to even do for 5 minutes. And like we talked about, yoga can also be really good. We want to talk about gratitude and staying in the present moment. When we're noticing what's in the present moment, we're less zoned out. And that is proven to really impact our satisfaction and happiness. So when you're mindful and you have gratitude, that can actually increase your happiness. So these activities that we do, even on a daily basis that seem small, will help bring a little bit more joy into our day, like holding the door for someone, saying thank you when someone does something for you, just doing a little surprise, like bringing your coworker a cookie from home, or something that made you feel good might also make them feel good. Give people positive feedback. And start a gratitude list. It's very important to write down even just 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And try sharing what you're grateful for with others and listening to what they're grateful for, because sharing positivity between people really helps as well. Community building is really important. So people with stronger bonds are also shown to be happier. It's an interesting study that I remember being cued into a while back. When I was being interviewed for things relating to the pandemic, and somebody brought up to me that people who were doing better during the pandemic tended to go to church. They were like, well, are religious people doing better during the pandemic? Should we reopen all the churches so people can go back to church? And I said, they don't have to be in the physical building of the church. That's not what's making them happy. And you can focus in on churches, but any kind of community organization, any kind of gathering together is going to provide you with that support. Because when we're together with people, it releases oxytocin. And that is an antidote to stress response in our body. Oxytocin is called a bonding hormone. It's called a relax hormone. It's a hug, it's a connect. And so when we have oxytocin from interacting with people around us, that will inhibit our sympathetic nervous system as well as our cortisol and decrease our stress. So like I said, even just interacting with people around you, going out and doing acts of kindness, paying for a coffee for the person behind you can do this, charity and volunteer work, your faith community, like we said, churches, neighborhood community groups, any kind of common ground community activities, so like yoga, art groups, anything that brings people together, having a musical community, again, if that's something you're interested into, that will again release that bonding hormone for you. Fitness is really important. We always hear about exercise, and it is true. Exercise makes you happier. Any kind of exercise, just going for a walk, just stretching, it gets you in a different mindset because exercise reduces cortisol and releases happy hormones like serotonin and other endorphins. Studies have shown people who exercise are truly calmer, they're less stressed, and they're in a better mood. And because of that, they have better relationships. So again, let's go back, more oxytocin, right? So if you have people you can exercise with, that's even going to add to your boost. And our studies showed that in 4 weeks of exercise, including a little bit of weight training and walking, reversed burnout by over 50%. Last thing I want to talk about is setting boundaries. And boundaries can be really difficult, But indefinite work increases stress and it increases anxiety. So if you are taking time out of your day and you are not setting limits on that time, you will be depleted. And when you are depleted, you cannot help those around you and you are ineffective at your job. So the most important thing you can do for others is to set boundaries for yourself. It is one of our core needs. We need to know we attained our goals, and if your work is endless, there is no goal. So making sure you have boundaries is one of the most important things you can do. If you are working from home, make sure there is a work-home boundary. There is a ritual that you do at the end of the day. You shut off your computer, you turn off your work phone, and you go maybe do some movement or some kind of exercise for the end of your day. Try to skip the glass of wine if you can. And make sure you have an on-call schedule that you share with colleagues, that you are not the only person responsible 24/7 for that work. Reach out to others, tell them you need help, tell them you are at your limit. And you need to set those boundaries first for yourself, because people are not going to do it for you. So it is possible to reduce your stress and start feeling fulfilled again at work. If you are exhausted, please take a break. Whether that's just for the afternoon, or if you need a day or a few days off to rest, just talk to your HR person. Let them know you are experiencing burnout. Rest is so important for us as human beings. Use your vacation time. But please reach out to us. We're here to make sure that you have good health. And that means mental health as well as physical health. Thank you.